At 7:12 a.m., I woke to the sound of metal snapping. It wasn't loud enough to be an accident. It was deliberate, rhythmic, steel against fasteners. I stepped onto the back patio in socks and found the north run of my cedar fence folded inward like a broken rib. 2 clean cuts through the posts, panels laid down flat. Beyond it sat a yellow crane, engine idling, one track resting a good 3 feet into my yard. My neighbor stood near the operator, coffee in hand, sunglasses on like it was a tailgate party. He glanced over when he saw me. Had to get the crane through, he said, casual as weather. Fence was in the way. I looked at the cut posts. They were installed 2 years ago. Sealed, braced, measured twice. "You're on my property," I said evenly. He shrugged. "Sue me." There wasn't any shouting. No scene. Just that word hanging there. I studied the ground where his tracks pressed into the grass. "You're sure about that?" I asked. He smirked. He thought he was crossing into his own land. He wasn't. I bought this place at 43, right when most of my friends were chasing bigger kitchens and shorter commutes. I went the other direction. I wanted space. A half-acre at the edge of town where things felt settled. No through traffic. No shared walls. Something I could pay down steadily and retire into without surprises. The fence wasn't decorative. It was boundary and privacy and resale value wrapped into one clean line. I had it installed 2 years ago after reviewing the survey twice. Cedar posts set deep, panels straight. It wasn't about keeping people out. It was about defining what was mine. I work in logistics. Details matter. Measurements matter more. When I closed on the property, I kept everything: plat maps, title insurance policy, county survey, even the drainage easement diagram. Not because I expected trouble. Because land is one of the few things you can't afford to misunderstand. Some men argue first and verify later. I've never seen that strategy age well. That morning, standing in my yard with a crane track pressed into my grass, I felt irritation but not panic, not anger, just confirmation. And that's why I didn't argue that morning. I went inside and pulled a file cabinet drawer instead. He'd moved in 8 months earlier and wasted no time making it visible. New stucco, oversized windows, black SUVs that never saw a speck of dirt. Contractors rotated through weekly roofers, landscapers, electricians, each one parking wherever it was convenient. He was adding a rear extension now, pushing the house toward our shared boundary. Crane was there to set laminated beams across the new span. I'd heard him brag once that it cost 85 grand just to rent and operate for the week. Around noon, my phone buzzed. "We're within our property line," the text read. Fence was over anyway. No greeting. No question mark. I watched from my kitchen window as my fence panels were stacked near his driveway, half on gravel, half in the dirt. One of the cedar posts rolled into the street before a laborer kicked it aside. No one knocked. No one offered paperwork. If permits were pulled, he didn't feel the need to show me. Later, I heard him telling a contractor, loud enough to carry, "Guy's fence was wrong. Had to fix it." He kept repeating that the fence was on his side. That's when I knew he'd never actually looked at the plat, and I was beginning to suspect something he hadn't considered at all. 3 days later, the forms went up. Wooden frames staked into the ground, rebar tied in clean grids, trench lines cut straight toward the rear setback. I stood at the edge of my yard and watched the concrete truck back in. The chute swung out, and gray slurry filled the trenches that ran closer to my side than they had any right to. Once concrete cures, changes the conversation. Boards can be replaced, posts reset, but footings are different. They anchor steel, they carry load. Removing them means demolition, permits, money. That afternoon, I drafted a letter. Short, direct. Sent certified. Notice of encroachment. Cease construction pending boundary confirmation. No threats, no accusations. Just record. He walked over the next morning, jaw tight but voice controlled. "My survey's done," he said. "You're wrong. I asked for a copy." He didn't provide one. That was the moment it shifted. This wasn't about a damaged fence anymore. It was structural encroachment, financial exposure, permit compliance. Insurance liability, if someone got hurt standing on concrete that didn't belong there. He thought momentum was on his side because trucks were moving. He didn't understand how quickly momentum can reverse. That's when I ordered my own survey quietly. I called a licensed surveyor the next morning. Not a friend of a friend. A firm that handled boundary disputes for commercial sites. If this escalated, I wanted credentials that held up under scrutiny. They scheduled for Thursday. 2 men arrived in marked vests with a total station and tripod. No drama, no commentary, just measurements taken from fixed monuments along the street and rear easement. They drove stakes, logged coordinates, photographed everything. My neighbor watched from his patio once, then went back inside. While we waited for the stamped report, construction continued. Framing lumber arrived. Anchor bolts were set into the curing concrete. I didn't interrupt. I didn't argue. There's a difference between stopping someone early and letting them commit fully. When the surveyor emailed to say the finalized drawing would be ready Monday, I thanked him and said nothing to anyone else. Crane wasn't the expensive mistake. The foundation was. And when the report came in, it confirmed exactly what I suspected. The stamped survey arrived Monday at 9:14 a.m. I opened the PDF at my desk and zoomed in on the boundary callouts. The northern property line was exactly where my original plat said it was. The new concrete footings crossed it by 18 inches at their deepest point. Crane tracks had run nearly 3 feet inside my parcel during access. There was no recorded easement for temporary construction entry. No shared driveway agreement. Nothing granting him permission to touch my side. 18 inches doesn't sound dramatic until it's poured in reinforced concrete. The surveyor included photographs, GPS coordinates, and monument verification. It was clean, defensible. I pulled the permit record from the city's online portal. His submitted site plan showed the boundary line shifted subtly, but enough to clear setback requirements on paper. Municipal code required a minimum rear and side setback, measured from the true property line. If the line moved back where it belonged, his addition violated code. Then I reviewed my title insurance policy. Buried in the endorsements was coverage for boundary disputes, including legal defense costs. That changed the risk calculation. If I filed a complaint immediately, construction would pause before the framing inspection. Could argue mistake, adjust, minimize loss. If I waited until framing passed into structural review, demolition would multiply his costs, engineering revisions, reinspection fees, contractor delays. I scheduled a consultation with a real estate attorney that afternoon, not to launch a lawsuit, to understand leverage, timelines, and compliance triggers. He had told me to sue him. I didn't have to. I just had to enforce the line. Framing inspection was scheduled for the following Thursday at 10 a.m. I took the morning off work, printed the stamped survey in full color, brought the original plat, the certified letter receipt, photographs of the crane tracks, and a copy of the municipal setback code with the relevant section highlighted. Everything went into a simple black folder. The inspector arrived in a white pickup with the city seal on the door, clipboard, tape measure, neutral expression. I introduced myself and waited until he began walking the perimeter of the addition. Before you finalize anything, I said evenly, I'd like to provide documentation regarding a boundary discrepancy. No accusations, no tone, just paperwork. He paused, took the survey, and scanned the seal. Then he walked to the rear corner, where the new framing met the edge of my yard. He measured from the structure to the stake my surveyor had placed. Then he measured again. The crew went quiet. My neighbor stepped out from the house, hard hat in hand. What's going on? The inspector didn't answer immediately. He checked his site plan, then the survey. These setbacks don't match the approved drawing, he said finally. My neighbor looked at me. You called the city? I provided documentation, I replied, voices lowered. The inspector walked the line one more time, then wrote something on his form. Work is suspended pending boundary clarification, he said. You'll need a revised survey and potentially revised plans. A red tag went onto the temporary power pole. That's when my neighbor's composure cracked. "This is harassment," he said, loud enough for the crew to hear. "You're trying to cost me money." I held his gaze. "You built on my land." Silence carries differently when other men are listening. The inspector left. Crew stood around uncertainly. The equipment idled, then shut down. That afternoon, through my attorney, I sent a formal demand letter. It itemized everything: full fence replacement with comparable cedar, soil restoration where heavy equipment had compacted the grade, compensation for unauthorized temporary land use, reimbursement for survey costs, and legal fees under the state's property damage statute. Nothing inflated. Every line defensible contractors talk. By evening, word had spread down the block that the addition was red-tagged over a boundary issue. Momentum shifted. His posture changed. The sunglasses stayed off. For the first time, he wasn't telling me to sue him. His attorney called mine the following Monday. The tone was different, measured, practical. Within 2 weeks, we had a settlement agreement. He agreed to remove the encroaching portion of the concrete footing under engineering supervision. Revised plans were submitted reflecting the correct boundary. He covered the full cost of my survey, attorney consultation, fence replacement, and landscaping to restore the grade where the crane had chewed through the soil. There was also a written acknowledgement of the true property line, signed and notarized. At my request, we recorded a boundary affidavit with the county, so the correction lived with the title, not just a handshake. No one raised their voice. Demolition crews returned, cut out the offending section, and hauled it away. Cost him time and money. It cost me patience. When the new fence went up, I upgraded the posts and set fresh metal markers at each corner. Flush with the soil but permanent. I placed the survey and settlement agreement back into the file cabinet beside the original plat. Property lines matter because stability matters, not for ego, not for dominance, for principle. He thought money moved lines. It doesn't, paper does.